Container gardening mistakes are silently killing plants, wasting money, and frustrating beginners every single growing season. And the worst part? Most of them are completely avoidable once you know what to look for. Before we dig in, I want to hear from you. What are you growing in containers right now, and where in the world are you gardening from? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing what this community is planting. Container gardening is booming right now. Over 20 million U.S. households are growing in pots, and the global container gardening market is on track to nearly double from about $15 billion to over $26 billion by 2034. People are drawn to it because it's flexible, accessible, and you can do it on a balcony, a patio, a rooftop, or a tiny backyard. But here's the thing that catches almost every beginner off guard. Growing in a container is fundamentally different from growing in the ground. Treat it the same way, and your plants will struggle, and eventually, they'll die. In a garden bed, your plants have access to a massive volume of soil, natural drainage, a steady supply of nutrients, and beneficial microorganisms. In a container, everything is limited. The soil dries out faster, nutrients wash away with every watering, roots run out of space, and temperature swings hit harder. Your container plants are essentially cut off from all the things that make in-ground gardening more forgiving. So if you're going to succeed with containers, you need to understand what makes them different and avoid the mistakes that trip up almost everyone. The first mistake is using garden soil instead of potting mix. This is probably the most common beginner mistake and one of the most damaging. You look at your garden bed, see perfectly good dirt, and think, why would I spend money on potting mix when I've got soil right here? The problem is that garden soil behaves completely differently inside a container. In open ground, it has structure, drainage pathways, worm tunnels, and room to breathe. Scoop it into a pot, and within a few weeks, it compacts into a dense, airless brick. Water pools on the surface instead of soaking through, and roots suffocate in the compressed structure. Iowa State University puts it plainly. Garden soil alone is not a good growing medium for containers. It compacts, resulting in poor water drainage and aeration. On top of that, garden soil brings along hitchhikers, weed seeds, soil-borne pathogens, and pests that thrive in the warm, wet conditions inside a pot. The fix is simple. Always use a quality potting mix formulated specifically for containers. A good mix will be light and fluffy, containing perlite or vermiculite for drainage and airspace, peat moss or coco coir for moisture retention, and often a starter dose of slow-release fertilizer. Some premium mixes also include mycorrhizae, beneficial fungi that colonize root systems and dramatically improve nutrient and water uptake, a detail most bag labels don't explain, but worth looking for. It's engineered for the unique environment inside a pot, and it makes an enormous difference. The second mistake is choosing containers without drainage holes. It doesn't matter how gorgeous that ceramic pot is. If it doesn't have drainage holes, it's a death trap for your plants. This is the #1 structural problem in container gardening, and it's surprising how many beautiful pots are sold without a single hole in the bottom. When water can't escape, it accumulates around the roots, suffocates them, and fungal growth kicks in. Root rot sets in, and root rot is nearly impossible to reverse once it takes hold. As one plant expert puts it, water logging can harm a plant's long-term health or kill it outright, particularly varieties sensitive to overwatering. Now here's where it gets interesting. A lot of gardeners think they can solve the drainage problem by layering gravel or rocks at the bottom of the pot. This is one of the most persistent myths in gardening, And research has proven it does the opposite of what people think. Studies from Cornell Cooperative Extension and the University of Illinois show that a layer of coarse material at the bottom raises what's called the perched water table. Instead of helping water drain away, it actually keeps the saturated zone higher in the pot, right where the roots are. So skip the gravel. If your pot has drainage holes, they'll do the work. If it doesn't have holes, drill some, or use it as a decorative outer sleeve for a pot that drains properly. 2 container types worth knowing about here. Fabric grow bags have drainage built into their entire structure. The porous walls allow air pruning of roots and prevent the waterlogging problem almost entirely. And self-watering containers work on a reservoir and wicking system that delivers moisture from the bottom up, which sounds counterintuitive but actually keeps the root zone at consistent moisture levels without ever creating the saturated conditions that cause root rot. Both are excellent options if you're constantly battling drainage issues. The third mistake is overwatering or underwatering. Overwatering is the single most common cause of container plant death, and here's why it's so tricky. The symptoms of overwatering and underwatering look almost identical. Drooping leaves, yellowing, wilting. Your instinct when you see a struggling plant is to give it more water, which, if overwatering is the actual problem, just accelerates the decline. Linda Langelo, a horticulture specialist at Colorado State University, describes it this way. If you start seeing drooping or yellowing leaves, check the soil. Ease the plant out of the container and look at the roots. If they're soft and mushy, you've got root rot, and at that point, there's nothing you can do but start over. On the flip side, many beginners are genuinely surprised by how quickly container soil dries out compared to garden beds. There's just so much less soil volume to hold moisture, and during hot weather, some containers may need watering every single day. The solution is to stop watering on a schedule and start watering based on what the soil is telling you. Stick your finger about 2 inches into the soil, and if it's dry at that depth, water thoroughly until it runs out the bottom. If you want to take the guesswork out completely, a moisture meter is worth every penny. You insert the probe into the soil and get an immediate reading, which is especially useful for larger pots where finger testing the surface doesn't tell you what's happening 6 inches down. Then let the top inch dry before watering again. And here's a pro tip. Ditch the saucers that sit under your pots. They keep the deck clean, but standing water in those saucers can wick back up into the soil and contribute to the very root rot you're trying to avoid. The fourth mistake is choosing the wrong container size. Container size matters more than most beginners realize. Too small, and you restrict root growth, limiting the plant's ability to absorb water and nutrients. The plant becomes chronically stressed, stunted, and prone to drought. Too large, and the excess soil stays wet for too long, creating the same waterlogged conditions we just talked about. Research shows that doubling a pot size can encourage up to a 40% increase in plant growth. That's significant, but you don't want to jump from a tiny pot to an enormous one all at once. The best practice is to increase your pot size by just 1 to 2 inches in diameter and about 1 inch in depth from the current container. This gives the roots room to expand without creating a situation where the root system is too small to absorb all that extra soil moisture. As a general guideline, anything 8 inches or smaller in diameter will only support dwarf or very small plants. Most annuals and perennials need a minimum of 8 to 10 inches, and honestly, bigger is usually better. Watch for signs that your plant has outgrown its home, if it needs watering far more frequently than it used to, if growth has stalled, or if you see roots poking out of the drainage holes, it's time to size up. We're halfway through, so let me ask you this. Which of these first few mistakes are you guilty of? Be honest. Comment the number down below, and let's see how many of us have made mistake number 1. You're definitely not alone. The 5th mistake is ignoring sunlight requirements. Getting sun exposure wrong is one of the biggest reasons container gardens fail, and it's entirely preventable. Every plant has specific light needs, and putting a shade lover in full sun or a sun lover in shade leads to disappointment every time. Here's a quick reference. Full sun means 8 or more hours of direct sunlight per day. Partial sun is about 6 hours. Partial shade is around 4 hours. Full shade means less than 2 hours of direct sunlight, or none at all. Most vegetables need full sun, so if you're growing tomatoes or peppers, you need that prime sunny real estate. But here's a nuance that catches people off guard. Container plants can actually be more sensitive to sun than the same plants growing in the ground. The soil volume is so limited that it heats up faster, dries out quicker, and roots cook in that confined space. So while your tomato plant absolutely needs full sun, you may also need to monitor soil temperature during heat waves and consider afternoon shade protection in the hottest climates. The beauty of containers is that they're portable, so use that to your advantage. Track where the sun hits your space throughout the day. Position your containers accordingly and move them as the seasons change and the sun angle shifts. The 6th mistake is forgetting to fertilize. This one sneaks up on beginners because nobody tells them the truth about container nutrition. Every single time you water, nutrients get flushed right out the drainage holes. In a garden bed, those nutrients stay in the soil profile and get recycled by microorganisms. In a container, they're gone. Even if you mix compost or organic matter into your potting soil at planting time, that nutrition will only last a few weeks. After that, your plants are running on empty unless you actively feed them, which is why container plants need regular fertilization every 2 to 4 weeks at a minimum. Water-soluble fertilizer works great. Apply it at full strength every 2 to 3 weeks, or dilute it to half strength and feed weekly. Fruiting plants like tomatoes and peppers are especially hungry and benefit from weekly feeding. Some growers dilute fertilizer further and feed daily during peak production. One thing that often gets overlooked here: soil pH has a direct impact on whether your plants can actually use the nutrients you're giving them. Even if you're fertilizing regularly, if your container soil has drifted too acidic or too alkaline, nutrients become chemically locked out and unavailable to the roots. Most container vegetables prefer a soil pH between 6 and 7. Potting mixes usually start in that range, but they can drift over time with repeated fertilizing and watering. A simple pH test every season is good practice, especially if you're seeing yellowing that doesn't respond to feeding. One other important note: if your potting mix already contains slow-release fertilizer, wait about 3 weeks before starting supplemental feeding until that built-in fertilizer has been depleted. And never do foliar feeding when temperatures are above 90 degrees or in direct sun, because the fertilizer solution can burn the leaves. The 7th mistake is overcrowding plants. It's tempting. You go to the garden center, everything looks amazing, and you want to pack as much as possible into every pot. But overcrowding is one of the fastest ways to tank your results, especially with productive crops like tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. When plants compete for the same root zone, everybody loses. They fight over water, nutrients, and light, growth slows, and yields drop. And here's the real kicker. Overcrowded plants attract disease. The University of Minnesota Extension confirms that crowded plants are more likely to develop fungal diseases due to restricted airflow and moisture retention. Disease that hits one plant spreads instantly to its neighbors when their leaves are touching. As garden designer Andy Wu puts it, stop overstuffing your pots as if you are thrifting for a TikTok haul. Less really is more. With container gardening, a single well-spaced plant in a properly sized container will almost always outperform multiple crowded plants fighting for the same resources. The eighth mistake is pairing plants with different needs. Even if you don't overcrowd, planting things together that have completely different requirements sets you up for failure. Pair a drought-tolerant succulent with a moisture-loving hydrangea, and one of them will be miserable no matter what you do. Before you combine plants in the same container, make sure they share the same light requirements, similar watering needs, and compatible growth habits. This doesn't mean every container has to be a monoculture. You can absolutely create beautiful mixed plantings, just be intentional about what goes together. And even for plants sitting side by side on the same patio in separate pots, resist the urge to water everything on the same schedule. Pay attention to each plant's individual signals. The ninth mistake is neglecting seasonal temperature changes. Containers respond to temperature shifts much more dramatically than in-ground soil. They heat up faster in summer and freeze more quickly in winter, creating a unique set of challenges that beginners rarely anticipate. When temperatures climb above 85 degrees, container soil can dry out shockingly fast. Terracotta pots are especially prone to this because their porous walls naturally wick moisture away. During hot spells, you may need to water daily or even twice a day. Winter brings its own problems. Container roots don't have the insulating benefit of being deep underground, and the container material matters. Metal, plastic, and wood can generally handle freezing temperatures, but terracotta, concrete, and ceramic pots are prone to cracking when water in the material freezes and expands. If you're overwintering containers outdoors, raise them up on feet or bricks so the drainage holes don't freeze to the surface. Use deeper planters because more soil volume means better root insulation. And keep in mind that winter losses usually come from excess moisture and root damage rather than cold alone, so good drainage is actually more critical in winter than in summer. Think of your containers as a portable ecosystem and move them to protected spots as conditions change. A south-facing wall in winter, afternoon shade in summer. That mobility is one of the greatest advantages of container gardening, so put it to work. The 10th mistake is failing to inspect for pests and diseases. Container gardening has a built-in advantage here. Your plants are usually at or near eye level, making problems easier to spot early. But that advantage only works if you actually look. The most common container pests are spider mites, aphids, whiteflies, fungus gnats, and thrips. They can arrive in the nursery pot when you buy the plant, hitch a ride in reused potting soil, or even come in on infected produce from your kitchen. That's why you should never reuse potting soil from season to season. Old mix can harbor pest eggs, larvae, disease pathogens, and salt buildup. Get in the habit of checking your plants daily. Look under the leaves, inspect the stems, check the soil surface. Yellowing leaves, tiny holes, sticky residue, or unusual spots are all early warning signs. When you do spot a problem, identify it before you treat it, because many times what looks like a pest issue is actually a cultural problem. Wrong light, wrong water, wrong nutrition. A stressed plant is a vulnerable plant. Between seasons, clean your containers thoroughly. Scrub them with soap and water. And if a previous plant had root rot or pest issues, disinfect with a bleach solution, rinse thoroughly, and let them air dry completely before replanting. So there you have it. 10 mistakes that derail beginner container gardeners, and every single one of them is fixable. The thread connecting all of these is understanding that container gardening creates a fundamentally different growing environment than anything in the ground. Your plants can't send roots deeper to find water, can't tap into a vast soil ecosystem for nutrients, and can't regulate their own temperature. You are the ecosystem. You are the rain, the fertilizer, the thermostat, and the pest patrol. But here's the flip side. Once you understand these constraints and work with them instead of against them, container gardening becomes one of the most rewarding and controllable forms of growing. You can pursue container gardening in any space, adapt to any season, and dial in conditions with a precision that's impossible in the ground. Start with the right soil, the right pot, the right plant in the right spot, and feed and water with intention. Do that, and you'll be amazed at what you can grow in just a few square feet of container gardening space. Now, I want to hear from you. Out of all 10 of these mistakes, which one surprised you the most, and which one are you going to fix first in your own container garden? Tell me in the comments, and if you've got a container gardening question you're stuck on, drop that too, because I read every single comment and often turn them into future videos. If this video helped you grow healthier plants, do me a quick favor. Give it a like so more beginner gardeners can find it, and subscribe to Plant Care Secrets TV so you never miss a growing tip. And if you really want to support the channel and go deeper, tap that join button and become a member. You'll get extra perks and help us keep these plant care secrets coming. Thanks for watching, and happy growing.